Cling desperately to the word love, while neglecting the practice of respect. And here is the truth: love without respect will falter. Because love is an emotion, brilliant, powerful, but also fickle. It surges and it dips. It expands and it contracts. Respect, however, is a discipline, a daily practice, a choice to honor the dignity of the other, even when emotion is tired, even when affection feels strained. Respect holds the bond steady when passion alone would crack. It shows up in tone, in listening, in refusing to belittle, in choosing restraint over cruelty. Without respect, love can curdle into control. Affection can twist into manipulation. What began as devotion can collapse into resentment. Respect is not decoration. It is the foundation stone. Remove it, and the structure will not stand. Respect is not simply politeness. It is protection. When I respect you, I protect your humanity, even in disagreement. I guard against the temptation to weaponize your vulnerability. I refuse to use my knowledge of your wounds as ammunition. And when you respect me, you do the same. Together, we create a container, strong enough to hold even our hardest truths. Respect does not erase conflict. It dignifies it. It ensures that even when we struggle, we do not strip one another of worth. In mediation, I often witness a turning point. Two people at odds, frustrated, weary, and then one says, "I still respect you." The air shifts, the ground steadies, because respect is the tether that keeps the connection alive, even when emotions threaten to tear it apart. So, remember this: affection may waver, but respect must remain. It is respect that keeps the bridge intact. It is respect that allows love to rebuild after storms. It is respect that ensures the bond is not only beautiful, but durable. Trust is often spoken of as though it were permanent. I trust you, as though the matter is settled forever. But trust is not a one-time declaration. It is a living practice. It is built in drops, through consistency, through honesty, through follow-through. Each small act becomes another drop in the vessel. Keep your word. Show up when you said you would. Speak truth even when it trembles. These are not grand gestures. They are the ordinary drops that make trust overflow. But when trust is broken, it rarely leaks slowly. It spills, lost in buckets. This is why betrayal feels devastating, because what was gathered slowly is emptied suddenly. And yet, a vessel can be refilled, not in a day, not with apologies alone, but with drops, patiently offered, over time. Trust is fragile, yes, but it is also renewable if both hearts commit to the work. If you want a relationship to endure, tend to trust daily. Not by demanding guarantees, but by nurturing patterns. Check in honestly. Keep confidences. Offer transparency where secrecy once ruled. In mediation, I often remind people, trust is not proven in speeches, it is proven in repetition. A single apology may open the door, but it is the daily choice to walk differently that keeps the door from closing again. And here is the quiet truth. Trust is not the absence of doubt. It is the willingness to move forward, even with vulnerability in the room. It is saying, I know you could hurt me, and still I choose to extend belief, because without belief, there is no bond. Trust is not static. It breathes. It bruises. It heals. So do not take it for granted. Do not assume it will hold itself. Attend to it. Water it with honesty. Protect it with consistency. Guard it with respect. Because trust is the living thread that weaves two stories together. And when it is tended, it can outlast even the fiercest of storms. When we speak of resolution, many imagine a pristine ending. No tension, no scars, every loose thread tied neatly. But true resolution is rarely that clean. Resolution is not perfection. It is a commitment to continue. It is two people choosing to carry the bond forward, even with history behind them. Resolution says, we may not agree on everything, but we agree to remain in relation. It is not erasure of conflict. It is integration. The acknowledgement that wounds happened, and yet here we are, choosing to hold one another still. This is the heart of mediation, not the promise of a flawless future, but the courage to create a livable one. And that courage, when practiced, turns fragile ties into resilient ones. As we close this hour together, hold this truth. Relationships endure, not because they are without struggle, but because they are tended with care. Respect builds the ground. Boundaries shape the bridge. Repair strengthens the fabric. Trust keeps it alive. And compromise, that art of meeting in the middle, ensures that two stories can continue side by side. None of this demands perfection. It demands presence, the willingness to stay at the table, to keep choosing connection, to believe that together is stronger than apart. Carry this with you. Resolution is not a destination. It is a rhythm, a practice, a circle you return to again and again, each time deepening the bond. And now, as you breathe into that rhythm, you are ready for what comes next. At 3 p.m., Amari Freeman will meet you. Their gift is breath. Their wisdom is presence. Where I have guided you, through the language of repair, Amari will guide you into the quiet art of stillness, teaching you how breath itself can become your mediator. You have laid the groundwork of relating. Now it is time to rest in the space between words. Every relationship, whether romantic, familial, or professional, begins long before the words are spoken. The ground beneath the dialogue, your posture, your assumptions, the state of your nervous system, matters more than the vocabulary itself. If the ground is hostile, even gentle words land as sharp. If the ground is calm, even difficult truths can be heard. This is why mediators like myself speak less about who is right and more about how we enter the space together. Pause and notice. What ground are you standing on before you engage? Are you rushing, tense, rehearsing your defense? Or are you breathing, grounded, ready to listen as well as speak? Because the state you carry in is the state you invite out. Your calm gives permission. Your defensiveness breeds more defense. Your gentleness opens the door. The first work of relating is not in the script you deliver, but in the ground you cultivate inside yourself. In mediation, I've seen this again and again. Listening changes the room. Not the performative nodding, not the polite waiting for your turn, but real listening. Listening that absorbs. Listening that acknowledges. Listening that says, I am willing to let your perspective touch mine. When one person listens, the other softens. When both listen, the argument becomes dialogue. And here is the paradox. When you listen deeply, you don't lose yourself. You find common ground. Listening is not surrender. It is stewardship. It is the tending of the soil, so the relationship can grow. So as you think of the connections in your life, ask yourself, am I speaking to win, or am I listening to understand? Because progress in relationships is not measured by who convinced whom. It is measured by how well we kept the ground, safe enough to return to tomorrow. Most conflict in relationships doesn't come from what is said. It comes from what is left unsaid. We carry invisible contracts in our minds, assumptions about how others should act, what they should know, what they should provide, without us ever spelling it out. You expect your partner to remember the date, your friend to call first, your colleague to notice your extra work. And when they don't, the silence feels personal. The disappointment swells. The relationship sags under the weight of an agreement the other person never knew they signed. This is the quiet fracture of expectation. It is not that the need is wrong. It is that the need remained hidden, and so could never be met. Unspoken expectations are heavy, heavier than most spoken demands, because they invite resentment without offering resolution. So the question becomes, are you willing to speak the contract aloud? Are you willing to say, "This matters to me"? That is where mediation begins, not with judgment, but with the courage to name what has lived in silence. When we fear speaking expectations, we convince ourselves that silence is safer. If I don't say it, I won't seem demanding. If I stay quiet, maybe they'll notice on their own. But silence does not protect connection. It corrodes it. Clarity, however, though vulnerable, though sometimes awkward, protects the bond. Clarity says, "I value us enough to risk honesty." It invites repair instead of quiet resentment. You cannot control whether the other person agrees, but you can free yourself from the exhausting game of waiting to be guessed. And often, when you risk speaking plainly, you find relief on both sides. They are spared the pressure of deciphering you. You are spared the loneliness of being unseen. This is not weakness. This is strength in its most relational form, to be clear without cruelty, to be honest without hostility. Because relationships flourish, not in perfection, but in clarity, not in guessing games, but in the brave work of speaking what is true. Many of us fear conflict, as though it were the death of connection. We imagine that if voices rise, if tempers flare, if we disagree openly, the relationship will crumble. So we swallow our needs, we smooth over the edges, we perform peace at the cost of authenticity. But here is the paradox. Conflict itself is not the danger. It is avoidance that corrodes. Unspoken tension festers in the dark. Resentment grows roots in silence. What is hidden always leaks through, often in sharper, stranger ways, than if it had been addressed directly. Conflict, when navigated with care, is not a fracture. It is a doorway, a threshold into deeper honesty, into truer understanding. It is not the presence of disagreement that predicts the health of a relationship. It is the absence of repair. In mediation, I often remind both parties, disagreement is not an enemy. It is a teacher. Disagreement shows us where our values differ. It shows us where our wounds are tender. It reveals the places we long to be understood. When you approach conflict as a classroom, rather than a battlefield, the entire landscape changes. Instead of, "How do I win?" the question becomes, "What can we learn about each other here?" And the lesson is rarely about who was right. It is about how you can carry two truths at once: your experience and theirs, your perspective and theirs. Holding both is not simple. It requires patience, a slower pace, a willingness to unclench your fists. But what comes through that process is resilience. Because every conflict repaired becomes a new brick in the foundation of trust. The relationship is no longer fragile, propped up by performance. It is seasoned, weather-tested, capable of withstanding storms. Conflict is not a dead end. It is a door, and when you dare to walk through it, with grace, with patience, with clarity, you discover that the other side often holds more intimacy, not less. We often idolize harmony, the appearance of calm, the illusion that all is well, because no one is raising their voice. But harmony without honesty is fragile. It is a glass vase, beautiful in the light, but one sharp bump, and it shatters. When we silence our truth to keep the peace, we create a brittle bond. The connection looks intact, but it cannot withstand pressure. True strength in a relationship does not come from avoiding rupture. It comes from surviving rupture together. When two people are willing to face the fracture, to name the wound, to risk the discomfort of truth, that is when the bond becomes real. Because trust does not grow in pretending. It grows in the courage to repair what was torn. In mediation rooms, I have witnessed this again and again. A sharp word spoken, a wound exposed, tears shed, and then a pause, a reaching across, a mending. What emerges after repair is not simply a return to before. It is a stronger fabric, the threads rewoven, tighter, more resilient, capable of carrying greater weight. Repair says, I care enough to admit when I've hurt you. I value us enough to stay in the room. I trust that this relationship can hold the truth of my mistakes. This is how intimacy deepens, not through flawless harmony, but through imperfect honesty that is met with repair. The next time conflict arises, as it inevitably will, remind yourself, the rupture is not the end. It is the opening. Repair is not a shameful admission that you got it wrong. It is a powerful declaration that the bond matters more than pride. Harmony can be pleasant, but repair is sacred. It is the process by which a fragile connection becomes enduring. When most people hear the word boundary, they imagine distance, a wall, a lock, a shutting out. And because of that, they fear boundaries. They think, if I set a limit, I'll lose love. If I speak my needs, I'll push people away. But here is the misunderstanding. Boundaries are not walls. They are bridges. A wall says, "Stay out." A bridge says, "Here is the safe way across." Boundaries provide clarity. Where I end and you begin. Where I am safe and where we can meet. Without boundaries, connection collapses under confusion. One person feels invaded, the other feels unacknowledged. With boundaries, the relationship has shape. It has integrity. It becomes a meeting of equals, not a muddle of overextension. Boundaries are not selfish. They are the conditions that make intimacy sustainable. Think of it this way. When you draw a boundary, you are not saying, "I don't want you." You are saying, "I want us to meet in a way that honors both of us." That is why I call boundaries acts of invitation. They carve out the safe middle ground where true relating can flourish. A friend who says, "I can't talk after 10 p.m., but I'd love to speak tomorrow," is not shutting you out. They are inviting you into a healthier rhythm. A partner who says, "I need time to process before continuing this conversation," is not abandoning you. They are making sure the bridge does not break under strain. Boundaries protect energy. They protect respect. They protect the very bond that might otherwise collapse under unspoken resentment. So let this truth settle in you. Every no you offer creates the space for a more meaningful yes. Boundaries are not endings. They are beginnings. They are the structures that allow relationships to endure with strength and grace. When tension rises, avoidance often feels like relief. You change the subject. You busy yourself with chores. You smile politely and tuck the discomfort away. In the short term, it feels like peace. But avoidance does not dissolve conflict. It merely buries it alive. And what is buried does not stay still. It ferments. It seeps through tone, through small resentments, through distance that quietly grows. Avoidance is like sweeping broken glass under the rug. It may disappear from view, but step there tomorrow, and you'll bleed. So while avoidance feels safer, it is not safety. It is delay. And delay compounds the cost. The alternative to avoidance is not cruelty. It is courage. To say, "This upset me. This doesn't work for me. This hurt." Not with malice, not with theatrics, but with clarity, with calm, with the intent to preserve, not punish. Facing the truth together is an act of care. It tells the other person, "I value this bond enough to risk discomfort for the sake of repair." And when you practice this, the relationship changes texture. It becomes less brittle, it can withstand truth. The cost of avoidance is accumulated resentment. The gift of honesty is renewed trust. So ask yourself, where in your life are you avoiding a necessary conversation? And what would it mean to risk honesty there? Not to win, but to protect the bond itself. Because avoidance will cost you, but truth, even when tender, even when imperfect, is the only currency that keeps love in circulation. Far too often, we treat compromise as surrender, as though the one who bends has lost. But compromise is not losing. It is choosing. It is the conscious act of saying, I value this bond enough to find the middle ground. Compromise is the architecture of durable relationships. Think of it as two rivers meeting. Neither river disappears. They flow into one another, carving a new channel that carries both currents forward. Yes, it requires adjustment. Yes, it requires humility. But it is not the death of your needs. It is the weaving of two needs into one shared path. The strongest partnerships I've seen, marriages, friendships, teams, are not those without friction. They are those with the courage to negotiate fairly, to balance give and take, without resentment. Compromise is not weakness. It is relational intelligence. What happens when you refuse to compromise? Every decision becomes a competition. Every conversation a battle. Every interaction a tally of who won and who lost. And in competition, the relationship itself loses. But when you step into co-creation, something shifts. The focus moves from my way or your way to our way. That does not mean erasing yourself. It means bringing your full self into dialogue while making room for theirs. It means saying, how can both of us leave this table feeling respected? Compromise done well is not about splitting everything in half. It is about finding the configuration that honors both people without diminishing either. In mediation, I call this the art of building bridges, strong enough for two truths to walk across. So ask yourself, in the relationships that matter most, are you competing or are you co-creating? Because the art of compromise is the art of longevity. It is what allows relationships to bend without breaking, to stretch without snapping, to endure with grace. Love, in all its beauty, is not enough on its own.